Hello, family. I'm Janaya Future Khan, and this is Dark Woke. Just before we hit it, I want to say thank you to all the listeners out there, and a special shout out to the supporters who make this show possible. It truly means the world to me. If you'd like to become a member, our Patreon is linked in the episode right up below. Hello, babies. What a start. What a start to a year. Nothing like going to a foreign country we have been tacitly or actively and explicitly antagonizing for decades for different reasons under different administrations, to cap it off with an administration today that can only be called full of dweebs and weenies who are greedy and disgusting human beings, if we can even call them that at this point, right? We all know I have serious doubts about Stephen Miller. That is a goblin 100%. And before we get into that, right, because we're talking about that, do a couple of bits on, Adam Mockler on Jubilee as a debate segment, after a couple of quick hits, but I just want to say, and my voice is a bit husky. My mother, Esther, passed away over the holidays, and I'm working through it. I can't talk about it yet, but what I know is I'm not going to forgive the fact that I wasn't allowed to be there with her. This is the year that we fight back. This is the year that we've been talking about all of last year. This is where the fight back really begins. And I promise you, the kinds of conversations and the kinds of momentum that's happening behind the scenes is very important. Does it mean a guaranteed victory? No. But when we have fought, every time that we have, meaningfully and well, we have won. And hell, even when we don't fight well, we still manage to get away with enough to keep our dignity intact, right? The same can't be said for the other side. And so much of today is going to be based on that. But we're going to be talking about my mom, at some point. She'll be in the book and everything else. But I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken. She's my best friend. Anyway, we're going to take a hard pivot, though, because some of you, this will be new information, but my mom was nuts. And I know a lot of people say that their moms are nuts, but mine kind of is clinically. She was just too good for this world. But one of the things that my mom did is one day she just woke up when, my sister and I were in high school. And, we weren't living with her at the time. I was in a group home and Raina was with friends. She was staying with a friend. But my mom just invented a Trinidadian accent. She was born in England and she's Jamaican. Her background is Jamaican. One day my mom woke up and put on a Trinidadian bandana and a Trinidadian lanyard and, and basically only wore red, white, and black her entire life. From that moment, in her later years, some pink was introduced. But she just invented this and then invented this accent and she kept it, and I believe a lot about that. And why it's on my mind is because, I always wondered why my mom chose Trinidad, right? Of course, that's where my dad's from. And so I took great delight in coming across a change.org petition that's calling to deport Nicki Minaj to Trinidad. Sorry, it's just this petition has 52,396 signatures at this moment. Sorry, I just think that's fucking hilarious. I don't know if the Barbs are aware of this, but this is a good time. Hell, it could have been the Barbs that did it. We don't even know. There is no political coherence, but don't worry, right? Because we can always count on the news. We've always got the news, you guys, right? We trust them. You know what? Why don't we see how the news, NBC in particular, is doing under, right, the illustrious guidance of Barry Weiss, a absolute skin tag of a human being, an afterthought, right? As significant as foreskin. That is the person that they put in charge of the entire news network. So in this moment of such political upheaval, certainly, right, the excellent leadership of Barry Weiss would become most apparent. Why don't we pull up that clip, Corey?
Atmosphere. With Maduro now out, that base of power and influence could be out too. All right, to other news, as you just heard from Jill, Well, as to other news now, to Governor Walz. No, we're going to do Mark Kelly. First day, big problems here. What, are we going to Kelly here, or are we going to go to Jonah Kaplan?
He's furious right now, y'all. And then there's just Kaplan and Kelly. Like, everybody looks mad.
Possibly demoted from his retired rank of captain in the Navy. Hegseth issued what's known as a letter of censure for the Arizona Democrat over his participation in a video that called on service members to defy illegal orders without specifying which orders he had in mind. Hegseth called what the former combat pilot.
All right, cut it. We don't need any more of that. That's how it's going. He was like, it took everything in that man to be like, can you guys get your shit together, please? I'm here under the gun on the camera. And y'all are just out here fucking around. Like, he was unbelievably stressed out. He was so furious. I'm so glad that we're in such good hands. We're in such good hands, right? I'm getting really excited to talk to you about Venezuela. I'm disheartened, but I feel a sense of possibility. I feel a great sense of possibility, but the window's narrow, and we're going to talk about why. We're going to historicize it. But before that, I just want to say, you know, there was ICE shut down a restaurant owned by an American for putting up a no ICE welcome sign. How's that free speech feeling? It's feeling good? Is it feeling great? Is it feeling fantastic? What about the fact that American protesters are just getting incarcerated for like no reason, right? Just because they criticize the government. All of this, though, is creating a counterforce. Now, here's the thing, and that's us. For a long time, we have sort of, because we create culture, it's been the other side. It's been the counterforce, right? So we assert something, sometimes things that we shouldn't assert, like, for example, right, trying to cancel people. I've always thought that was a very stupid strategy, because when you create a force, right, on one side, you would never, it's invariable. You're going to create a force on the opposite side, and then someone who should be insignificant becomes someone, the forces combine together, and then it becomes a debate about this person, right? And then people attach whatever their weird emotional needs are to it. Jordan Peterson is a prime example of that. That's a person like this little rancid reptile of a man who should have been, who pushes a carnivore diet and like lectures everybody, you know, men about making their beds and how women and men are inherently different, and uses lobster analogy to describe it. Like, this guy should have just been insignificant in Canada. So, but we're the counterforce this time. We're the counterculture. And that is a unique opportunity for the left. We haven't been allowed to be that. We don't actually have an identity anymore, right? Do you remember when we used to believe things like feed your neighbor, or, you know, I heart seniors, right? Like, we used to actually care about that stuff more than we did respect my pronouns. I don't give a fuck anymore. I really don't. And for the record, you know, I have no problem with people asserting who they are in the world. It's the idea that therefore everyone should sort of bend to that worldview. Not everyone is for you. Your community absolutely should. Your family, ideally, people who love you. But we're not entitled to being sort of referred to in our most preferred way. But we can advocate for it. What I'm not okay with is punishing people who don't. Again, you create a counterforce. And I believe on the last episode, we talked about it, this term, terminal uniqueness is insufferable faggotry. So that's sort of where we're at. I do want to get into this Venezuela stuff. I'm a little bit rusty, so you'll have a bad bout of food poisoning and an unbelievable amount of grief. So I really appreciate, your patience if I'm a little more loquacious than usual or meander, but, I'm going to bring us back. But there's so much here that it's just, I think we're just going to have to cut right through. And I'm feeling good about that. I couldn't believe what I was reading, researching, understanding. And again, if you've read Stephen Kinzer's work, and I think Corey and I have revisited the Substack, and I think one of the things that we're going to do, because I'm about to be an internet whore of, not thrilled, but now it's do or die. So I appreciate, your patience in getting us here. So I want to jump into Venezuela, and if we have time, we'll do a little bit of the Adam Mockler stuff, but honestly, we can do that next episode. It just depends. So we've got to get into Venezuela. There's so much to be said about this. There's the historical aspect. There's the multiple administrations. There's the fact that America has intervened and destabilize countries all over the world, and never for the benefit of the American people. It's always for the enrichment of a few. It is always for the enrichment of a few. What I'm saying, more blanket, like, let me remove the blanket and make it really clear. American taxpayers, right, of which I am one, no citizenship, but you take my money, right? American taxpayers, and a taxpayer like myself, they take our money and then they use that money and they fly people to a country and invade that country and then steal the president and his wife and bring them here, right, for a plan that at best is a gamble to enrich a small few of the already grotesquely wealthy, the grotesque enrichment of billionaires. You pay for it. We pay for it. We hurt people in the process. And when I say we, I'm not talking about we, but you know what I mean. 75 Venezuelans died in the process of abducting the president of Venezuela. And what do the American people get out of that? What have the American people got out of any of the wars and interventions? No, it is always the hands of a few people that make money. And I'm going to detail some of those things. But first and foremost, I want to just make some things clear. So what happened? Well, why don't we open up with what Colbert had to say about why this is happening right now?
Do you know what this means? Those Epstein files must be crazy. I mean...
All right.
Something.
Yeah. They'll do anything.
This operation, launched just 2 days into the new year, came as a shock, especially since, and this is true, Trump's New Year's resolution was peace on earth. Well, that didn't last long.
Yeah. Well, we never had it to begin with. And by the way, I do have a boo-boo on my face. Sula, my baby girl princess, my dog, discovered Bluey and then got upset when I closed the laptop because she was watching too much Bluey, and then she smacked me across the face with her big horsefoot paw. She didn't mean to, but now I got a boo-boo. No, but Bluey is the shit. Let's get into Venezuela. Okay, so what happened, right? Over the weekend, right, well, 2 days into the new year, as he said, President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela and his wife were abducted by U.S. forces, right? The pair currently face drug trafficking and narco charges in New York. So they're in New York in prison, right? I'm going to tell you something. None of this has anything to do with drug trafficking. I mean, you know this. It's not even just that you know this and I know this. It's that this is all Donald Trump is talking about. It's just the oil. It's the oil. It's the oil. It's the oil. What can be confusing, right, is what does it mean that one authoritarian American imperialist regime topples a dictatorship in South America? What do we do with that? Because I have heard a few liberals a little bit confused about how to feel, which is my polite way of saying they're feeling the wrong way about this, right? Which is, this is a good thing. And here's the thing, right? Democracy is possible in Venezuela, just not with U.S. interference. I want to detail, right, the number of times that that America has invaded a foreign country. It has nothing but failed interventions, and the best comparison to what this is Iraq. It is the best comparison, right? The language around it, the justification, except for instead of, Islamophobia-driven terrorism, we're dealing with drug trafficking and narco-terrorism. And narco is just another word for brown, right? Which we all know wouldn't exist without the CIA's, propping it up. But that's another conversation for another day. I just want to very briefly remind you about what America has done. Its legacy of devastation all throughout Latin America and South America, right? I want to talk about refugee crises. Oh, and our borders. We create destabilization in the West and then judge the people who want the same things that we want. And the thing is, for all the destabilization and resource stealing, right? Oh, America's the greatest superpower in the world. You want to know something? You want to know how America became the greatest superpower in the world? Because it robbed the American people. That's how. We're going to get there. So first and foremost, we got key examples, right? Guatemala, 1954, overthrew a democratically elected president, Arbenz, whose land reforms threatened the United Fruit Company's holdings. That's literally it, right? Leading to decades of military and civil war. Again, I can't wait to talk about the Kinzer book, right? The brothers. Corey and I were talking about it. I can't remember if I already said this, but we're this is our year. Reviving the Substack, because I think who has time to read these days? To just break it down, because so much of what is happening right now was a result of what just some assholes did a couple of years ago, and they're still happening now. And if we reveal and remove the curtain, and you realize that you can just beat the shit out of Oz, that's what we have to remind ourselves. But anyway, so we had Guatemala in 1954 when the CIA overthrew a democratically elected president, right? Iran, 1953, right? That was a US and UK joint operation where they overthrew, what's his name? Mosadeh? Something like that, right? To secure oil interests and prevent Soviet influence, right? Remember, always, this is an easy way to understand what has historically been America's and the world's foreign relations. Trump is bending a lot of that, but it hasn't really changed. Okay, so you've got, this is important. Generally speaking, you have Canada, the UK, and the US versus North Korea, Russia, and Iran, right? France is on our side sometimes, or sometimes they're neutral. China is on their side sometimes, and sometimes that's neutral. All of this is related because Venezuela has the largest natural oil resource. It is in the world. Much of that oil has gone to China and Russia. So all of this, right? And even so much of what we see online isn't even what's happening in America. It's just Russian and Chinese driven bots at the same time, right? That they're against American imperialism doesn't mean that they don't have their own designations and their own divinations on what they want. They would prefer some kind of collapse and they enjoy destabilization. We're the ones who have to exist through it, where we go online and we wonder, is this any way to live? Is this all there is? So much of what we're experiencing isn't even from real people. And it's going to get worse. And so how we spend our time and where we spend our time is going to be so important. But remember this, right? Canada, the UK, and the US versus North Korea, Russia, and Iran, right? With France on our side, sometimes neutral, China on their side, sometimes neutral. Think about how Trump has disturbed that, right? With Russia and his relationship to Putin. Think about how much he's disturbed things with Canada, but it hasn't ultimately changed Russia and China's relationship to America at all. Let me go back into this list, but all of this is going to matter. So when I'm talking about this, I want you to think about it in this global way. It's a lot easier when we understand some things that are just universal truth versus this situation, because you can actually just plug and play historically once you have an understanding of the larger political landscape, okay? We had Iran in 1953. And for the record, I want to remind you that Iran was awesome. Like, there was an old episode we've done, we can dig it up. It was, I mean, women were walking around in bikinis on a beach. They were living their lives, driving, teaching, being taught, whatever, being regular human beings, allowed to be regular human beings. Yeah. That's now, this is a country that's currently run essentially by the Taliban, thanks to America, right? It started back then. Chile, 1973, the U.S. supported the coup against another democratically elected socialist president, Allende, right? Whose nationalization policies threatened U.S. mining interests, right? This led to a brutal dictatorship. That point right there on nationalization has so much to do with Venezuela and America's response to it currently. Latin America has, over the years, and different countries at different times, has tried to free itself from the death grip that America has on it so that it can constantly mine its resources. And again, this isn't enriching Americans. It's not even enriching America. It's enriching a small handful of billionaires and multi-millionaires whose only interest at this time is to increase their wealth while you pay for it and while I pay for it, right? So in Latin America in the 1980s, of course, there's a U.S. backing of governments. This is my favorite part. Great contra-rebels in El Salvador and Nicaragua. There's a lot of documentation on that. And if you want a good resource for this, Noam Chomsky's How the World Works is really great. It was one of my first real introductions to foreign policy. And I realized, because we were all little organizers and running around. And I was like, I've never heard a leftist identify one of these randos who write this foreign policy in any administration. We don't know or think about who they are. I think this is our invitation to change that. I don't think we can sort of be so self-obsessed anymore. And of course, throughout the 1980s, it was all justifications around the Cold War and anti-communism, the bullshit, right? Venezuela. Oh, Venezuela. We got sanctions. We got support of opposition, right? The interventions. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of what happened, because how does a country, this is a good question. It was my question. How does a country that has the largest natural oil, resource in the world, how is it so poor? How is it so poor? Like, get it out. Go get it. They sell it. And here's the thing. They were doing that. This is where we talk about how we got here in Venezuela. And we'll bring it back to America. But I do want to say, when we think about why destabilization happens, right? That reference I made to the United Fruit Company, these are things that I never thought about. And I think, and it was Kinzer's book that changed that. And I'm realizing that we're not strong when it comes to understanding how law firms, some of which have been around or since fucking not long after America came around, right, have, worked tirelessly, on these like massive global companies and their enrichment, because those are their clients, again, at the serious cost of the American people. So why do we do these things? It's not because we're the leader of the free world. You know this stuff, right? It's almost exclusively to protect corporate assets, right? Or it's to get rich. It's resource access or it's corporate access. And that's about it, because the resources need to be profitable, and you make that's the corporation. The business is what deals with the resource, right? And the methodologies that the United States has used has ranged from direct military action to covert CIA operations like coups or funding the opposition, including supplying folks with weapons and new technologies, right? And trying to force compliance through economic sanctions. Why is America even able to impose those things? It's what happened when they sold out the American people by making the US currency the default currency in the world. That's when globalization happened, right? Where companies got rich, these corporations got rich, and everybody else lost. Because now they could exploit other people around the world and pay them fucking pennies for what they were paying American people decent wages for. And the entire time keep dangling this red herring of bullshit racism that so many folks are still so eager to bite on, as if you have more money in your account because of it. That's the thing that I don't understand. But that's another conversation for another day, right? The point is that all of these interventions, and I've only named the significant ones. I haven't even named the failed attempts, right? Where just people died for no reason. What I can tell you is America's never had a successful intervention because it was never about intervening. It was about resource stealing. And even then, they haven't done it well. What the fuck did we get out of Iraq? But some people got really wealthy from that, right? Some people, some corporations. These have to be our targets moving forward. It's not simply about the administration. Our approaches are not diverse enough, right? There was an article that was pulled in the New York Times because one of these like birds in, someone third ranked in, I don't know, the interior of whatever the fuck, right? Of agriculture, whatever. in Trump's administration, literally, it's just naked corruption. She sits on the board. Her husband needs essentially a document rubber stamped so that he can make millions and millions and millions of dollars, which he was guaranteed, but only if that interior whatever approved it. That got pulled. Rachel Maddow has a great segment on that. That was supposed to be the key story in the New York Times over the weekend, but we didn't get it because it got submarined, is the term that Rachel Maddow used. It got pulled. So not only are we not getting the information, even real information online from real people it's an absolute fucking quagmire, but we no longer have news media that can report accurately on what's happening. And this is something that we have to know. So the due diligence that I'm going to bring to this is going to be higher to make sure that, the fact checking is happening, everything else. And one of the things that we'll be doing finally, we'll figure out how, is of course the sourcing, but I do like to tell you where I get things from. For example, this list that I have, it's from Harvard. They got a great asset online because I was like, I need to know everything. So it's, in Revista, drcals.harvard.edu. United States interventions. This is what I need us to know, right? Because I got a lot of notes. What do we get from this, right? Americans didn't get anything from this, but more political instability, civil conflict, humanitarian crises, right? That is the result for the American people. For people like Trump, he makes off with billions. For people in the oil industry, but even his gamble, and this is salivating to get to that point. This is a gamble. Trump is making $100 billion gamble. And I'm going to explain how and why. Okay. First and foremost, how did we get here with Venezuela's infrastructure, right? We've got, this is a country that was doing so well in the 1970s. Okay. I mean, crushing, like to the point where they were like, you know what? I think we want to do this ourselves. I think that we can, we're making so much money, hand over fist, but Venezuela is not seeing it, right? Venezuela was not seeing the full extent of the wealth that their oil was producing because the companies that were pulling up the oil and that were managing the oil were American companies. So this is now Chavez. This is before Maduro. Chavez himself, depending on who you're talking to, is also a kind of dictator, right? And again, this is what happens because America constantly intervenes and destabilizes countries so that they can take their resources. I think we just had a clip, late in the last year, we talked about how many times the U.S. has intervened in Haiti, right? And when you actually just present the facts, people can't say shit about it. But it was because of Chavez's unfinished revolution. Okay, so let me get into that for a second. So long before Maduro is now sitting somewhere in New York, Mamdani, free my no, I don't give a shit about Maduro. I care about the Venezuelan people, but he's in Mamdanistan right now. But long before that, there was a massive domestic rupture that reshaped Venezuela, and it happened under Hugo Chavez, right? So his ascent to power in 98 came from a kind of domestic collapse. He was like, all this wealth all this wealth, and we're not seeing it. So he had this idea that he was going to nationalize, okay? He was going to nationalize oil. So that means that these American companies are no longer going to be profiting because the profit is for the Venezuelan people. We are going to do this ourselves and take care of it ourselves. It was a little bit, I'm being polite, right? It was a gamble, and it didn't pan out, right? So there was chronic mismanagement, political instability, sanctions played a huge role. I mean, massively, right? And when you have a country now that was wealthy, was doing well, and then is not, right? You're going to blame the guy in charge. Your nationalization plan didn't work, but it's because they were getting punished by the entire Western global economy. That's why so much of their business around oil has been with China and Russia, right? And again, this wasn't done well, but there was a reason for it. There was a logic behind it. So they kicked, it was a whole thing, there are different steps, right? Different levels of intervention. But the country nationalized its oil industry decades ago, right? So then why aren't they producing oil? Is the next logical question. If they nationalized it, then what happened? Who has the right to pump? I guess, in 2007, Venezuela expropriated most U.S. oil assets and kicked 2 of the 3 companies out of the country. So at the time, it was Exxon, ConocoPhillips, and so those were the 2 countries that got ousted. Okay, I don't even know. I know Exxon. I don't even know that other one. 4 other major oil companies: Chevron, Norway's Statoil, BP, and France's Total signed pacts allowing Venezuela to increase its stake to as much as 83% in projects worth $30 billion. So even though the U.S. had felt some kind of way, other countries were like, yo, okay, I think we can come to some sort of understanding. I think we can figure this out. But the sanctions that the U.S. imposed, right? And remember that this is like only America can impose sanctions like this and have it be as meaningful as it is, right? Because they're the default currency. But again, other superpowers have evolved. And are you a superpower if you can't be one without constantly taking from others? None of America's oil infrastructure is set up for what we currently have as oil in America. It's mostly shale. Go ahead and watch you some Landman if you want some like good conservative propaganda. To me, it's just boy soaps. I know it's Taylor Sheridan. You've heard me talk about the boy soaps. I just like to write down what they say and then research it so I know. But I also just enjoyed a good dose of toxic masculinity. Definitely not promoting it. Oh, I'm a proponent of toxic masculinity. I'm saying I'm not promoting Taylor Sheridan's shows. But mostly now, America's drilling across America in shale. It's most of its technology is not for that. But those crude oil reserves that most of our technology was created around, it no longer is useful. It's no longer useful because we don't have the oil anymore. It's mostly through shale. So and I know we're like, what are we talking about, the details? But it's so important that we understand how we got here, right? So the U.S. sanctions further restricted access to foreign capital, technology, and markets, which exacerbated Venezuela's economic decline, right? So now, Venezuela, its oil infrastructure starts to erode. Because of these sanctions, the country's not making money. They're blaming the government. They're blaming each other. It's very expensive to search for oil. It's extremely expensive, and it's always a gamble. And just, I know this is like so random, but just hear me out. Isn't it incredible, right? That like humans have been around for a few 100,000 years. We're not even a blink in the history of the planet. It always amazes me, though, that oil is just from deceased marine life, mainly, and like ancient marine life and dinosaurs. And this is what we do. It's incredible that we actually can be that innovative, that we can find something in the ground that actually is from the decay of ancient life, like massive beings over hundreds of millions of years. There were so many like dinosaur eras. I didn't even know that shit. And the miracle that we can find some shit and this is what we do. I just can't wrap my head around it. We could be living in paradise. Everybody could be having more than what they need. It's so that we can be doing the things that make life meaningful, like figuring out who the fuck we are and finding love and fucking writing and making shit, like the things that make life worth living. And this is what we've done with it. I can't wrap my head around it. But anyway, the other thing is it's really hard. So yes, it's hard to get oil out of the ground. It's hard to find oil. Looking for it is expensive. We're talking about $40 million gambles sometimes, right? And that I'm lowballing. So when you have heavy crude oil, which is, the kind of richest, thickest one, that requires specialized equipment, constant investment, right? And dilutants. Those have to be largely imported from the US. So that system broke down without foreign support. it was gone. And America had the ability to punish countries that didn't treat Venezuela the way it wanted. That's created kind of Dutch disease, right? Which is what happens when you have an over-reliance on oil revenues, right? Weakening other economic sectors, creating an unhealthy dependency and making the entire economy vulnerable to oil and price vulnerability. So what I'm saying is Venezuela didn't have anything else to power its economy. So when the oil industry started to collapse because they wanted to give their people the wealth from their own country, there was no way, once some of these American companies were thrown out, to maintain it. They simply couldn't. And because the country had no other means of economy, it was almost entirely dependent on its oil production. It suffered catastrophically. Oil production plummeted from 3 million barrels per day in the 90s to less than 1 million barrels per day in recent years. Devastate. It's going to devastate a nation's economy, even with its massive reserves, because what use are the reserves if you can't get to them? Now we're here, right? So you've gone from Chavez to Maduro. None of these are great guys. Like, it's far more nuanced, but you're never going to hear me say, and it's the result of corruption. I mean, you can see it everywhere that America has been. It's all across the continent, in Africa, right? And even still, Africa develops. And I mean, go check out Speed's stream sometime. Good place to live. Very different vibe. I always have to remind myself that the sickness is really in America. There's bad shit. There's a sickness here. And it's hard because I know it's weird. It's like, oh, I love this country because I love to fight. And you're going to get the best and the worst types of folks here. But the best are too drawn, too threadbare, too busy. And so we got to shore them up. And to be clear, our best is you. You're our best. And the job for the rest of us is to clear out the fucking pathway so that you can get access to the information you need. So we have the understanding, so we know how to intervene. But this is one of the dumbest things that a president has ever done, because he faces an unbelievable amount of hurdles, right? I mean, but to be clear about the level of corruption, let me just put it this way. Trump informed the oil companies right here, so some of the ones that I've named. He informed American oil companies of their intention to steal and abduct the president of Venezuela before they informed American Congress. That's where we're at, right? That's where the fuck we're at. It's a $100 billion gamble. Let me pull up this clip because I just want you to hear Trump talk about it a little bit before we get into what we can expect, where we go from here, and what gamble am I talking about exactly. It's funny because you know what a great resource is right now, outside of things like, job site news, et cetera, but like the BBC can weigh in much more honestly. But even some avowed Republicans, members of the GOP, conservatives, like that vulture Kelly, Megyn Kelly, right? They're very much against this, because when the fuck, as staging a coup or overthrowing a government or regime, whatever you want to call it, when has it ever benefited the American people? Ever. It doesn't. It just ends up costing trillions of dollars, right? For unpredictable, and that was unpredictable oil prices. And where's the key investments in alternatives, right? So I'm gonna let the BBC spit for a second, and then I'm gonna talk about what the gamble is and where we can expect what we can expect to happen from here.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
Can't even read.
Plan could be a long and arduous process, costing upwards of $100 billion. Well, Sally Yilmaz, senior oil analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, joins me now with more from Dubai. Good morning to you. I wonder how willing US oil companies will actually be to rebuild Venezuelan oil infrastructure when, as we've been hearing throughout the programme, Sally, the political future is just so uncertain?
Good morning. Good question. And the answer is that we don't know yet. There hasn't really been an announcement from the likes of Exxon or Chevron. I suspect we may get an announcement in the coming weeks. But these companies would be looking for political certainty alongside operational certainty. These are big investment decisions. And the question is, could there be a directive from the White House for these companies to make these investment decisions? And it's important to remember these are private companies trying to maximize shareholder value. So they really will need to have that political stability, that security, and on top of all of that, very favorable terms for them to be incentivized to even consider going into Venezuela.
Yeah, exactly. With oil prices already relatively low, surely more supply would just drive them lower. So what could that directive look like to incentivize those companies to invest in Venezuela?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And, the argument we've been making is that maybe for spot prices, this is not going to change much. But when you look at the back end of the oil curve, which is where the oil companies' investment decisions are made, that's probably going to flatten a little bit. There's going to be a lot more pressure on that. And as you already mentioned, this is already a pretty soft pricing environment. And also important to remember, this is heavy oil, generally tends to have higher break-even costs. So it's going to be interesting to see how these companies are incentivized. And also very important to note, a lot of these companies, not just US oil majors, but globally, these companies have been having very cautious CapEx plans, and they've been prioritizing shareholder returns.
Yeah,
so
let's pause for a second. So I'm going to just synthesize what that pretty man was talking about, okay? Trump was like, I'm clearing the way. The oil companies are going to run in, da-da-da. No, they're not. They're not running. They're not sure. This is where, as I mentioned, it's a gamble searching for oil. You don't know where it is. You can assume based on where seas were hundreds of millions of years ago and on other, success that you've had in a region, but it's not an exact science. And the cost of this could be $100 billion or more. This is why it's $100 billion gamble. So the expectation is that these oil companies would just go in and they're all, I guess, 10 of them are just going to shell up $10 billion. Well, they're not known for giving money away. I don't know if you guys know that. It's not really a thing that oil companies do. So the expectation was that they would just re-enter the country because Trump ousted the guy and then propped up, the current vice president. Right? I was like, see, we're good now. Okay. So let me synthesize. We can cut the rest because, my boy's just going to go on explaining it. But I want to just synthesize what we talked about. Okay. Trump steals Maduro over the weekend, right? Swoops into Venezuela, steals him and his wife. I'm sorry, I can't believe it. And predict, and all in the gamble, right? That U.S. oil companies would just spend billions of dollars, billions of dollars on to get massive profits, right? And then they were going to earn massively, and including Trump, right? Oh, and then we were going to give some back to the Venezuelan people. No, I've yet to see that really happen, right? Venezuela has more proven reserves, and that word is very important, proven, right? Again, searching for oil is an extremely expensive, arduous process. It's dangerous. The technology is constantly crashing, breaking down. It's disgusting. You're going deep, and it costs millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars to try to dig into it, and there might be nothing there, right? So the fact that it has proven oil reserves more than any other country is significant, and even then, right? And even then it's a gamble. So who has the right to pump and profit, right? Comes with serious baggage. Who owns the oil now, right? So again, just to synthesize, the U.S. influence on Venezuelan oil ended in around 1999. There were attempts to nationalize at different eras. It was not considered so controversial in the late 70s, etc. But I want us to lock in here, right? Because Chavez described himself as a Marxist, as an anti-imperialist, and he promised to reduce U.S. influence in the country. That was what he promised to his people. And at the time, Venezuela was doing exceptionally well. right? Huge amounts of oil, reaping profits, hand over fist, right? But that oil was controlled by ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, and Chevron, not the Venezuelan people. So in 2007, he's like, I'm going to dramatically expand the nationalization of the oil industry. So again, what had happened in a smaller way was now going to happen in a big way. So he forced those companies, right, as well as the companies from other countries, we named some of those, to transfer the operational control of their businesses to the state oil company. So you are no longer, Exxon and all these Chevron, all of you, you're no longer going to be in control of the operation of the businesses on this. It's going to go to a state oil company, right? PVDSA. I don't know how to say that. Petróleos de Venezuela. Okay. I'm sorry. Sorry. It's not one of my gifts. Somebody teach me a different language, please. Right. And they wanted all these companies to accept minority stakes, effectively seizing most of their assets. It's their assets. It belonged to the country, right? After that, so once that happened, Venezuela owned as much as 83% of the projects concentrated in the Orinoco River Basin, one of the richest, most extensively explored oil fields in the world, right? Conoco and Exxon could not reach agreements with the Venezuelan government, and by the fall, they left the country. And ConocoPhillips said it was going to write off its $4.5 billion investment, right? So that's $4.5 billion that the Venezuela no longer has. There's nothing coming now, right? Chevron stayed, and Venezuela's oil industry was subject to insanely strict U.S. sanctions, right? Even though Chevron was allowed to pump and export oil under a special license, okay? So this has been an ongoing thing for a really long time. And the thing that bothers me always is like why racism is involved. Like we have, it pisses me off. This is a bit random, but indulge me for a moment, right? Because I did some research into what happened in Minneapolis, and there was a massive scam in daycare that was 100% largely, Somali operated. Yeah, that's called corruption, baby. It's nothing to do with race. Look at our fucking administration. Look at the history of the United States. But I just hate the whole race. Like it's always the Somalis. This is a people that understand honor. It's pathetic and it's stupid. And that's the thing that gets me. And this is the thing that we have to keep playing and remind us of to everywhere else in the world, right? Including Canada. Nowhere's perfect and not even close, but it's considered you're a stupid person if you believe in racism. And if you talk the way that Tucker Carlson talks, and again, we saw that when he was exposed across from Piers Morgan, it's just they sound hysterical and stupid because it is. It's just stupid. We need not indulge it. And so when it comes down to, it's the Somalis, we need to be able to say, actually, no, people steal. Yeah, because we create conditions for that to happen because everybody's life kind of sucks. Because a small handful of people are too goddamn rich. It's just that fucking simple, right? It's literally just that simple. I'm going to skip over, a lot of the shit that went back and forth. Chevron currently has 3,000 employees in Venezuela. And it's like, we're going to keep them safe, but they're not rushing into the country as Trump envisioned. So now we have to figure out, and I'm curious about what happens, right, to the Venezuelan people. Where do we go from here? How do we support what is best, right? There is a small window for a kind of intervention, right? Because political legitimacy in Venezuela exists. And this is the thing that they'll fucking lie their fucking asses off for, because they lie about everything. All of democracy is possible everywhere. And political legitimacy exists in Venezuela. In 2024, Venezuelans voted overwhelmingly for opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez, right? Maduro didn't take well to that. So that resulted in the Maduro regime rejecting the results and clinging to power. Guess who's talking about that in 2028, right? And we're not even being destabilized by a foreign country. We don't need to. It be your own. Although, God knows there's enough. Anyway, we don't even, So it's the infrastructure or the possibility is there. The infrastructure needs to be supported. There just needs to be a credible stabilization effort. That's it. Venezuelans have a voice. They've been using it. So in maintaining Delcy Rodriguez, now this is the VP that the Trump administration has propped in its place, in place of Maduro, right? She's a close ally. But we don't know exactly what happens. What we do know is that she's not who the Venezuelan people want. They wanted Maduro gone. They will celebrate his being ousted, but that doesn't mean that they're celebrating the expansion of American imperialism and the theft of their natural resources. That country is starving, largely because of American destabilization efforts and punishment, because they wanted their folks, their own countrymen, to be able to eat and feed their families, right? You don't want refugees? Stop creating refugee crises. How about that? How about more of that, right? So, let me take a sip of water. Got too excited in my little how about that. Got myself. And keep in mind, most of the time, like if you go back to like the Bush administration, because again, this has happened, America's tense relationship with Venezuela and vice versa has, been seen through under all the administration, Clinton, Bush. That's the Venezuelan people. Is there liberation? Is there a possibility for that? So they're going to celebrate that, but they're not going to they're not celebrating the expansion of American imperialism. Please, can we be so fucking serious? They didn't want Maduro. They don't want Delcy Rodriguez, but we have yet to see what the outcome of this will be. So she's a close Maduro ally, and as president, right? I can only assume that she's going to continue to reject the choice that the Venezuelan people made, because she's now backed by America, and she's backed by the powers that be in America. So America is now standing in the way of the will of the Venezuelan people, actively, and will prevent the reestablishment of the rule of law. At present, you've got random gangs of people, right? And not like gangs like the racists love to yap about. I'm talking about just people in the streets of Venezuela, checking people's phones, doing that because they're getting propped up and propagated by a number of interests that we won't really be able to uncover for years to come. But we've got enough information to make some educated guesses. So I'm going to round this out here because this has been, but it's so important to really understand what the fuck is happening. Because so much of why things feel impossible is because we don't oftentimes, right? There is democracy in Venezuela is what the people voted for. And all it would take is some restabilization efforts, right? From a few US companies. And why I say that? Because you stole from them in the first place. You stole from them in the first place. I'm just, we're talking about a country that's struggling around basic infrastructure, electricity grids, water systems, transportation networks, right? They've all been severely deteriorated over the years. Where's Venezuela's military? Oh, well, it's fractured, criminalized, complicit, not monolithic, not clear. A transition, one into the rule of law for the Venezuelan people, requires immediate unity of command. And that's not what America's interested in. They have no desire to do that. In fact, a destabilized Venezuela is most beneficial currently to the Trump administration. And they're going to say that that's not what it's about. But again, he's not even making the naked, he's not even lying like different administrators, the Bush administration did, with Iraq. He's not even lying. He's just like, it's about, we getting the oil. Oh, yeah, no, they had a dictator, that's bad, but they don't need to do that anymore. They don't need to hide. So my question to us is, why are we hiding our beliefs? Why are we hiding what we know to be true? Why are we yelling every day? Because it's hard when you're doing it alone. We're not going to be doing it alone anymore. That ship has sailed. That's over. This is a situation. There's far more nuance than I can capture in this moment. But we know now, like you can hear it in Stephen Miller, you can hear it in Trump. Whatever decisions happen around Venezuela's oil industry is no longer in the hands of Venezuela. It's false president or the people. That's been stolen from them. American tax dollars paid for it. Americans will pay the price. Paid it before and you paid after, so that a small number of people can get more and more wealthy. I want you to go back to, and I'm rounding this out now, and we'll do the Mockler stuff tomorrow, but I want to round this out here. Again, I want to go back. North Korea, Russia, Iran, right, versus Canada, the UK, and the US. We have China over here, France over here. Mostly neutral. All these destabilization efforts, we don't actually know. What Donald Trump has done has created a mind fuck on a global scale that's going to have implications that we don't even know yet. It's gloves off. It's got to be gloves off. This is no way to live. And I know that you know that. This is no way to live in constant uncertainty. Americans are facing economic strife on unprecedented levels. When they say the economy is doing fine, they mean their economy. Billionaires are economies unto themselves. We're talking about billionaires who have more wealth than most countries in the world because they stole the fucking, you know what I mean? What's left over of massive mammalian and reptilian life from hundreds of millions of years ago. That's how dumb this shit is. This is a massive blow to international order. China's not going to just accept this. We don't even know what's going to happen because China is currently Venezuela's biggest oil customer. I'm going to tell you something though. China's not going to fuck up their bag. They're going to make sure they get what they want. That's why their people are doing better than the majority of American people. Their quality of life is higher. That's not a perfect country. There's mad censorship. But honestly, we got this shit here. And it's pretty bad because it's not evenly applied. At least over there, it's evenly applied. Here, it's like, is that a nig-nog? Shut up. Is that a tranny? Shut up. Just say faggot. Like America's being run by the fucking worst people in high school. And we're going to take that shit? I don't fucking think so. Absolutely not. So let me break it down one last time and make it as clear let me make it as crystal clear as possible. Okay. Trump makes $100 billion gamble. That's your money. You paid for some randos to go over to fucking Venezuela and steal its president and his bitch and fucking throw them in a jail in New York. I didn't mean to say it the B word that bad. I don't even know the lady. So I'm going out on a limb and I'm talking shit. So let me just have it. Okay. America has destabilized almost every country in Latin and South America for decades. So any reality of dictatorships, because that Maduro is a dictator is not in question, is a direct result of America's interference and their attempt, right? Venezuelans, the government of Venezuela, and sometimes not democratically elected leaders, like, Maduro, for example, right? But in this case, I'm going to go back to the 90s and Chavez. When they're like, okay, well, actually, we deserve more. This is like, this is our country. It's our oil. We have minority stakes. You guys should have minority stakes. Why do we have minority? Because the whole point, every time that America has gone somewhere, it's about creating destabilization so that the conditions that come out of it are favorable to America, but it's not Americans that it's favorable to. It's for a small subset of people we barely know the names of. And that's about to fucking change. We can't just keep trying to hit the Trump administration. There's so many more. We fracture them and we isolate and we attack. Guerrilla this shit. But anyway, the point is, Americans paid for the theft of president and his wife in a foreign country, abducted them and brought them here after creating unbelievable destabilization over decades in Venezuela, punishing them for trying to enrich their own people in their own country for their own resources, right? Try to imagine anywhere in the West accepting that. And when they tried to change the conditions, they've been punishing them ever since. And what we've seen is a kind of economic collapse that has made the Venezuelan people even more vulnerable. That country should be as rich as any other country in the world. But they're not, because they had the audacity to advocate for themselves and fight back against imperial forces, and are being punished in the exact same way that countries like Haiti are being punished today. Where America goes, devastation follows. And the people that get rich are never the American people for it. In fact, you get poorer. And they try to tell you, well, you pay a little bit less for gas sometimes. Is that enough? Is that enough? Is that all it takes? Not anymore. It can't be. It simply can't be. I think at this point, we understand that this accelerationism shit, it's creating conditions that are untenable. We are the counterforce now. This is where we now enter the arena. This is where things change. It's going to be slow at first, and then it's going to happen all at once. But I'm telling you, I'm just sitting in meetings all the time or listening to people. We're ready. Movements are coming. It takes a minute to cook. This is the most consolidated, fascistic, authoritarian power in our lifetime that we have ever experienced. And it's going to take a very strong strategy to do it. We are creating a blueprint for 21st century models of organizing. But I want to say this, like, we're going to use all the jokes and the shit talk, all the sarcasm, whatever, but sincerity is the antidote to fascism. Sincerity. That's just stupid. Why can't gay marriage? Tucker Carlson is literally suggesting that part of why the U.S. intervened in Venezuela and stole its president was because maybe because they don't have gay marriage there and they want it. What the fuck are you talking about? And fix your hair. It's very uncomfortable to look at. What are you even talking about? Right? But rather than mock it, you say, you hit it with sincerity. Is it so wrong to find a little bit of love in the world when so many of us don't have it? It's not because it's going to change his mind. Who gives a fuck about him? It's about understanding that we have to speak to that human condition that we've lost our relationship to. And this is the last thing I'm going to say. And it's not related to any of this, but I was talking about it with Corey and he said, I think you should share it. Okay. Tomorrow we'll pick up on the rest of the stuff. Okay. But I'm here. I'm here. I'm here in the way that I couldn't be there for my mom. So all the things are, the toe stepping and the sometimes this, or, I hate, it's done because I wasn't there and I'm here. And so being here has to fucking count. It has to mean something. And this is what I want to say. At this moment, when so many of us feel powerless or uncertain, all we're experiencing is political discord. We're getting inundated with the worst stories about humanity, and our country is being run by some of the worst people in humanity. It is so easy to try to then look at ourselves and say, okay, well, what am I? And focus on the self, right? Because that feels like control. And you start thinking, but then you start thinking too much and you're not enough and you don't know what to do. And you're alone and you feel isolated and you don't know how to talk. I promise you, that is an American exceptionalism lie. This is the worst time to be thinking about yourself because we find ourselves by thinking about others, right? And it's not, you don't matter. It's that you're not the most important person in the world. It's the people that love us that make us feel that way. We are not the people that are supposed to be telling ourselves that. The people who are running the country are the people who fucking tell themselves that. It is a trap to isolate and become so self-obsessed and you can't get out of it. And it feels like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But it's a trap, right? Now is not the time to over-focus on what we've done or not done or what you've accomplished or not accomplished. It is, how can anyone not feel like a failure under these conditions? But you're not. But if you keep putting yourself against, the conditions that we're living in, yeah, you're going to lose. We win when we come together, like that's what community is. It's not fuck this administration. It's feed your neighbor. Yeah. It's not, fuck Donald Trump. I don't give a fuck about these. There's obviously too many of them, right? It's I heart seniors. Sincerity is the antidote. That's going to mean though that we got to leave our fucking houses. And as someone who has been in an absolute grief spiral, I poisoned myself by accident. There's a lot of things. Okay. It's not been an easy time for anyone, but I almost fell into the trap. It's easy to. I have no interest in being trapped. That's the whole thing. If we're constantly just in our own heads, beating ourselves up for not being the version of the person we thought we were going to be, we're never going to be those people. And the only reason you don't feel like that is because evil people in the world are doing evil fucking things. Right? There's still good work in front of you. There's good work in front of me. There's good work in front of us. And it's never too late to be the person that you always thought that you could be. That is the ethos of this movement. Time. That's the heart. That's where we win. This is no longer about gotcha. It's about marginalizing these fucking snake oil salesmen and rendering them irrelevant by essentially just strangling them out. And how? It's not about making people smaller. That's what we try to do. That's a cancel bullshit that I always thought was stupid. We don't make people smaller. It's not how you win. You make yourself bigger. You tell a story that's better and you get people to buy into that. That's what we do. And somewhere along the line, we forgot that. And it's because we let the losers on the left be the loudest because we count ourselves out. Well, that's done. I will drag you out of your motherfucking house. And you want to know how? By going out myself. I'll be there. And we got to be there. And that's just it. You're not a failure. Yeah? You get that? We haven't failed because this administration is in power. This is the failure of society. And in this moment, we get to decide who we want to be in the reality of it. So with that, I love you all very much. I'm with you. I'm not letting Corey go. Corey could try to get away from me. I'm not going to let him go. And this is just a thing that's just going to grow. I've been met with more kindness than I thought I could expect here in light of my mother's passing. And, I miss home. I miss feeling a history with people. I miss, people liking me. You know what I mean? Like for me, because I'm off-putting and challenging, I know, but I'm worth it. And so are you. Remember this, right? This is not my quote. It's from Fiona and Cake, okay? But it's like, we're all a little messed up, but that doesn't mean we need to fly solo. So here's the flying together. I love you all. Can't wait for tomorrow's episode. Thank you, Corey, for making us look good, sound good. And thanks to you for making this possible. This, under the worst possible conditions, this is our year. And the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. This story isn't done. Your story's not done. And I can't wait to see what comes next for us. So I'll be yapping your ears off tomorrow. And I can't wait for it. But yeah, no more small. No more small. Love you all so much. And talk to you so soon.